Welcome to In Pursuit 360. Today, we're going to be talking about the hiring process for law enforcement. What are actually all the steps put together and how does it all work? All right, here we go. So, the hiring process for law enforcement. Of course, it's going to start off with you making the decision that, yes, you want to be a police officer or a deputy sheriff, depending on what agency you may pick. That's the first thing that you're going to have to do is pick an agency or pick several. I highly recommend picking several. But know what kind of law enforcement you want to go into. Do you want to work for a local sheriff's office? Well, that kind of depends. If you're in a location like where I am, which is halfway between Washington, D.C. and Richmond, the counties here only have a sheriff's office. So the sheriff's office handles everything. They do all the patrol work, courts, civil process. We don't do the jail anymore. We have a regional jail, but we used to do the jail. Or we also have a city department that's close by, a small city department. And of course, they're only within the city limits where we cover the entire county. Go a little further up I-95 and you have Prince William County Police Department, Fairfax County Police Department, Arlington County Police Department. That's just in Virginia. Of course, that's where I'm from. I'll be talking a lot about that. So you need to pick what kind of department you want. Up there in Northern Virginia, the sheriff's offices handle civil process, court security. Some of them will have like a domestic violence task force where they check on prior people that have been convicted of domestic violence or have a protective order out against them, and they'll go make periodic checks on people. Just to make sure that there's not been any violation of any court orders. County police departments up there handle the road. They handle operations and tend to do answering of calls and taking reports and responding to things and making traffic stops. So those are some of your local differences. So you got cities, you have county sheriff's office, and you have county PD. And then depending on what county you're looking at, the sheriff's office may handle everything, or the sheriff's office may only handle a limited number of things. And then, of course, there's always state troopers. Applied for Virginia State several years ago. Didn't make it. Scored a 95, but wasn't high enough. They were looking for a different demographic at that time. So my letter said, believe it or not. That's a whole nother story. So the state police, and depending again on where you are, is what depends on what job they do. So Virginia State Police, around where I'm at and up into Northern Virginia, they're primarily traffic and working accidents. They will respond to calls if they get them. They tend to get some rolling domestic violence calls every now and then where they're driving down the road and fighting. They'll get those. But now if you get into the southern part of Virginia or the southwestern part of Virginia where you only have like 2 or 3 deputies per county or per shift, then the state police tend to get a lot more into more criminal activity. They'll answer criminal calls and they're a lot more, for lack of a better word, well-rounded. So they deal a lot with the traffic and the accidents and stuff like that. They also deal with the criminal side. Unfortunately, I think in Northern Virginia, the state troopers kind of get cheated. They work a lot of accidents, and they assign them to the concealed weapons or the weapons permit background investigations and stuff like that. And they'll get a stack of them that they have to do within a certain amount of time. But they get cheated out of working the criminal side. So that's state police. Then there are the federal agencies. And here in the DC area, I can tell you, we have got every alphabet combination of law enforcement agencies that you can even possibly think of. I worked for one. I worked for the Pentagon Police. Anywhere else in the country, you tell somebody you work for the Pentagon Police and they're like, ooh, wow, really? Oh, that's cool. But I can tell you in Northern Virginia, Arlington County and Alexandria City Police and stuff like that, you tell them you work for the Pentagon, they're like, oh, okay. They're force protection. They don't do a lot of criminal work. Their job really is access control in and out of the Pentagon, patrolling the reservation and their designated offices throughout the DC metro area. They have outlying offices that are occupied by DOD. And so they have a mobile patrol, but they're really limited. They don't do car chases and stuff like that. Every now and then they might stop bump somebody, but that's mainly because they went the wrong way on a one-way. And if nobody's ever been to the Pentagon, it's got a big loop of a one-way all the way around on the south side of the building. So there's federal. Capitol Police pretty well does the same thing. U.S. Park Police is a different story. They're a little more active because they're at all of the national parks and in D.C. So they have like, the mall. They've got the BW Parkway. So they run a lot of traffic and answer calls and stuff like that. So ATF is another one where you're going to, get your hands a little more dirty there. FBI, a lot of the investigations anymore, a lot of them they're looking for, first of all, you have to demonstrate a work experience first. But FBI, they're looking for like bankers and economists and stuff like that. They have some guys that are out there really working the street, but most of them are behind a desk working on computers trying to, they're looking up bank crimes and embezzlements and things like that. So, again, first thing you have to do, pick an department or an agency. What do you want to do? So then you have to fill out your application. And then you wait. And then you wait some more. And you wait a little bit longer. Now, depending on the size of the department or the agency, will depend on how quick you hear back from them. Some of the smaller departments, you may hear back pretty quick. And their hiring process may be rather fast. Larger agencies, it's going to take some time. You're probably looking at a grand total of anywhere from 6 to 9 months before you actually start, from beginning to end. The time you turn in your application to the time that you go off to the academy, that's just going off to the academy, up to 6 months. So you send in your application. Then there are a few different ways this can go, but the processes are basically the same. So you're going to have probably a written test. You are probably going to have a polygraph. You're probably going to have a physical agility test, and probably going to have a psychological, plus an interview, usually an interview panel, where you've got 3 to 5 people sitting at this big table across from you, and they're each taking turns asking you questions over and over again, just to kind of see how your mind thinks. They don't expect you to know everything about law enforcement, but they do want to see how your mind thinks through the scenarios that they're going to give you. So you run through all of those, and then you wait. And let's say, and don't forget the background investigation. They will go talk to everybody that you've ever known. Not exactly, but they will talk to a lot of people. They will go back several years to former addresses, former friends, former bosses, former coworkers, and ask questions about you to find out if you are a trustworthy soul or not. And some of those questions could come up in your polygraph. Don't lie. I have a video on that too. The one thing guaranteed to get you fired from law enforcement is lying. Do not lie on anything. Not your application, not your resume. Don't embellish. I'll do a separate video on resumes and applications, but do not embellish your stuff. Be honest. That's the one thing that they're looking for. If you smoked weed, tell them you smoked weed. I smoked weed. I told them I did. At age 13, I was a little pothead. I smoked for a whole year, probably 2-3 times a week. Told both the law enforcement agencies that I worked for that was the case, and they were good with it. It was a long time ago in my past. I showed that I changed my behavior and wasn't doing it anymore. Be honest. All right, so interview. You'll go through the interview process, and then they say, congratulations, you're hired. They'll give you a start date. You'll report. Usually there's a week or two where you're going in and you've got to go through HR. You got to fill out all your paperwork. You have to figure out what your insurance is going to be. You do all the paperwork stuff. Depending on what agency you're with, when I originally got hired with Stafford as an auxiliary in 1993, sheriff's offices in Virginia have up to 1 year to send you to the academy. So on my first day, they handed me a badge, a gun, had me go try on some uniforms. So I took home a couple pairs of pants and some shirts, got me a gun belt with all of my equipment, handcuffs, pepper spray. I had everything. Went home, put my little uniform together, and within 2 weeks, I was out on my first ride-along as an auxiliary. And I had the same powers as any other deputy out there on the street. So every agency does it a little bit different. They may bring you in and make you do some ride-alongs before you even go to the academy, and just kind of judge, or they may actually in the application process require you to do some ride-alongs just to see how you're going to react to being out on the street. The first time you're doing 120 miles an hour going down some back roads, you will figure out if this world is really for you. It will definitely catch you off guard or wake you up. So now we've covered everything up through the application process. Now you've been hired. You've gone through your week or two of doing all your paperwork. Now comes the academy. So the academy is going to teach you the basics. It's going to teach you about criminal law. What is intent? What are the pieces of the crime, the elements that you have to put together in order to make the decisions on whether or not to arrest for that specific crime or not. So they'll go through and show you how to put all those pieces together. They'll run you through some scenarios. They'll teach you about traffic, how to make a traffic stop. What are the traffic codes? What can you stop people for? What can't you stop people for? How to do a search, how to handcuff, some defensive tactics. Now, defensive tactics have come a long way. When I went through the academy back in 1994, they were doing a lot of 5-move kata stuff. So it was like, 1, 2, 3, and doing key locks and things like that. But I think it's really evolved. When I went to FLETC for the Pentagon, law enforcement officer survival skills, it was MMA fighting. So they were teaching you, if you actually got into a hands-on confrontation, they taught you just how to win. So, they're talking, hammer fists, the whole thing, crabbing and shrimping, and, how to get out of, like, if you end up on the ground, how do you get out of it if they're on top of you, if they're in your guard. So they covered a lot of it. They talked about knife fighting, and they were electric knives that when they hit you, it hurt. So defensive tactics, things like that. So you get through the academy, and they're teaching you the basics. Then you go back to your department, and now it's time for field training. This is where you really learn how to do the job. Now, the academy has taught you the basics, the basic ideas of things that you need to know. It's your field training officer that is going to really educate you in how to apply everything you learned in the academy out onto the street. So field training is where the real learning begins. The academy is real, but the real learning, how to apply all that stuff, it's out on the street with your field training officer. This can last anywhere from, and we're not talking federal like the Pentagon for 6 weeks, anywhere probably from 12 to 18 weeks, depending on what agency. I've heard some of the agencies actually have a 6-month FTO program. Take all the time you can get. Do not be too anxious to get done with field training before you get out onto the street. Field training is invaluable. So you get through your field training. Now you're on your own. Now you're a rookie. Now you're still learning. And here's the thing. When you're out there on your own, or you're released from field training, and you've been on the street for 10 years, if you think that you know it all now, that you've got enough time under your belt that you know it all, get out. Get out of the career field, go find something else to do. Law enforcement is forever changing, forever evolving. You should forever be learning, always learning. Don't give up on that. All right? So that's the entire process of getting hired as a law enforcement officer and everything that you'll have to go through. So if you liked what you've heard, hit the subscribe button, smash the like button, the thumbs up, hit the bell notification, and you'll know when I come out with a new video. Come out with one at least once a week. And you all be careful out there and stay safe.